welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Gordon Auchincloss, who is a former assistant district attorney for Santa Barbara County. And I got a chance to sort of get to know him, although after I've mentioned him to other people, I guess he's sort of a legend, an icon in Santa Barbara County. But I got to know him watching a Santa Barbara leadership team meeting recently. And, he's talking about housing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Gordon, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Josh. I was part of the evacuation the other night, so that was certainly dramatic, but happy that the fire department was able to handle that for us. So my wife's out. She just baked cookies for them. So that's what we're about today.
Yeah, it's amazing the work that the firefighters do to sort of, prevent things from being much worse than they are. And we sort of get reminded of it every year, every couple of years. And we're just reminded of it again, in this urban area where we're at. But we're also mixed into so many hillsides that just at any point, anything can happen. So we're so lucky. One of those things we take for granted. Gordon, I wanted to talk to you today about the issue of homelessness, because we were, I was listening to the Santa Barbara leadership team meeting, and so many big issues came up on the issue of how to handle the rising sort of tension that we've seen with homelessness in Santa Barbara County. And it's been around forever. It's an issue that has not really changed much, although the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely sort of maybe exacerbated it, and made it more visual in the last year. So I want to talk to you about what you're working on, because, you talked about a navigation center for how to deal with homelessness. So I thought we could just sort of talk a little bit about what that means. And I just want to sort of just clarify too, you've had this incredible decorated career in the district attorney's office, but today you're retired. This is something you're doing in your volunteer time. You're tackling this, and you're working with a whole bunch of different agencies, but this is something you're doing on your own time, not associated with the DA, correct?
That's correct. And it's important for me to make that crystal clear that I'm not speaking today for any board or public agency or Joyce Dudley or the DA's office. We're just having a chat about my own thoughts and experiences and what I've learned over the years in trying to deal with this problem. And it's been something that's been at the forefront of my career as a DA. Obviously, homelessness is something that confronts the criminal justice system in a big way.
Yeah, so let's talk about what is in the conversation right now as it relates to how to deal with the rising sort of visual presence of homeless people in Santa Barbara County. We know that Santa Barbara, just like a lot of coastal cities throughout California, is a place where we're going to see homeless people. I mean, everybody wants to live here. Obviously, it's a place where homeless people can live. The climate is such that it's obviously less challenging than some other areas. We've had the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're seeing sort of these rise in encampments all over. Everybody's affected because of the pandemic. And now you're sort of talking about navigation hubs, a place for them. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, what that looks like, and what's the idea behind how to house or take care or deal with the homeless at this point in time?
Well, probably it's best to begin with, what you just mentioned, the incredible seeming increase in homelessness in Santa Barbara. A lot of reasons for that. Obviously, COVID is a big one. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, asked public agencies to stay away from encampments and not disturb them because of the risk of, spreading the disease. The Caltrans pretty much backed away from enforcement along rights of way. So, we're seeing a lot of encampments along the highways. In addition, I think there were certainly some economic displacement issues that COVID helped push even further. But before that, we have our, we have the problems with respect to people who are chronically homeless that pre-existed COVID, which, as I think when we chatted earlier, I was telling you about the high percentage of individuals that are dealing with mental health and drug and alcohol problems. So, and then finally, I guess the last thing would be the changes in the law. A lot of people have heard of the Boise decision, but if you haven't heard of it, this is a decision a couple of years ago where the federal courts came out and basically mandated that, basically prohibited criminal sanctions against homeless individuals for sleeping outdoors on public property when no alternative shelter is available. So, in terms of code enforcement or telling people to quit trespassing or you can't sleep here, that has very much disappeared in a big way because of the Boise decision and the lack of shelter that can be offered. So a lot of moving pieces driving this new presence that we're seeing. Getting to your question of a navigation center, that's really just one thing that I'd love to see. But in my work in the criminal justice system, as I said before, I think it's critical that you define what you mean by homeless. Some people who are homeless are living in an RV. Some people who are homeless are young people who are kind of enjoying the life on the road. I've talked to them on the street. Some people are at risk from becoming homeless. Some are economically displaced, but the cohort or the group that concerns me the most, and I think is the one that really can provide us with the biggest win in terms of a better community, while serving the homeless who are suffering the most and have the greatest needs, is if we focus on the chronically homeless who are struggling with mental health and drug and alcohol issues. So that's my approach. Yeah. How would you like me to proceed from here? I can tell you what my thoughts are. I mean, I have some ideas about how we can move forward.
Well, it's an interesting topic because we tend to lump, people who are not down in the middle of this tend to sort of lump the homeless all together. Okay, they're the people that they see, sleeping on the streets, or they might see somebody who's camping somewhere, and it's all the same to them. But the people who are actually dealing with the homeless, as you've articulated, there's a very few number of people who take up most of the services, and it's really important to sort of identify who those people are and try to work with them and try to get them into some sort of support service program to help them. And that's really key. One of the challenges, though, is shelter, roofs over their heads. So if you are able to, you have a caseworker and you're able to help them, and if it's mental health issues and there's medication involved, those are fantastic things. But here in Santa Barbara, it feels as though there's just not enough space, shelter, roofs for people. So can you talk a little bit about how that is working or how that's happening? If you've been around Santa Barbara, you hear there's this group, there's that group, all these people, there's all this funding that's going to everything. We used to have a homeless day center, we have PATH now. We've got all these organizations that are always talking about homelessness. But, if you're a person who owns a business on State Street, or if you're a tourist or you're local who's downtown, you're like, this is still an issue here in Santa Barbara. So can you maybe sort of break it down and sort of like, what is the issue right now, and how do we actually make some progress in this regard?
Well, Josh, we are really blessed in Santa Barbara County to have some incredible organizations, the Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, PATH. Up in North County, we have Good Samaritan. So we have some really great shelter organizations that help us big time. And they continue to help us. So, that is a relief valve for us. That being said, we dramatically need to increase shelter to deal with the need. And that's something that, perhaps I can talk about here if you want.
Yeah.
There are some interesting opportunities that we have. The old saying, never waste a good crisis. Well, we have a big crisis right now with the encampments. There's been an overwhelming increase in the number of them. We know that they represent health and safety risks that we have to address urgently and immediately. And we have, I think we have the political will, and I'm hoping the political courage at this point, where we can come together, cities, counties, our county, organizations, and really focus on outcomes that are going to be meaningful. And how are we going to do that? Well, obviously it takes money, right? I mean, we start there. And there are some great opportunities right now, incredible opportunities we've never had before. You've heard about the $12 billion that's coming down from Sacramento, Governor Newsom's plan, and we'll see how that shakes out, because we don't really know how those dollars are going to be allocated. But another great source of dollars for us to deal with this problem is the American Rescue Plan Act, which is coming from Washington, ARPA. $2 trillion. That's a chunk of change, and that's going to make its way down to individual counties and individual cities. And Santa Barbara County, as I understand it, is scheduled to receive upwards of $170 million in ARPA money. Now that's for COVID relief. That just doesn't flow into the homeless coffers. But the language in the bill, as I read it, and as I think others are reading it, does allow us to use those funds to mitigate homelessness. So, we do have this great opportunity with money coming into our county where we can really make a difference with respect to housing and also with the services that we have to provide. Because, housing without services is really putting a Band-Aid on the problem. I mean, it's obviously we need the housing part, but wraparound services, I think, are critical. And the county, I think, recognizes that, and so do the providers. So the money part of it is, we need more. It's certainly not enough. It's not enough to fix all the problems we need. So we're going to have to align our spending with things that where we can do the most good. But in terms of opportunity to make a change, today's the day. And I think I think there's a lot of good that's going to come of the next few months in terms of our use of these funds and planning on how to use them effectively.
What is the concept behind the navigation center? What would that look like in terms of having housing and services for homeless individuals? I feel as though with the recent visual awareness of the encampments, if you drive on Highway 101, you're going to see the encampments. And if you sort of look for them sort of around the bushes around Highway 1, you'll be surprised at how many you see. We just had the fire. It was not started, as far as I know, by an encampment, but we do know that a lot of these fires start because people are trying to stay warm, or they're trying to cook in these encampments. So I feel as though there's going to be an added sort of pressure to do something quick so that we don't have this urban disaster. What is the concept behind the navigation center, and what would that look like?
Well, it's a broad term, and it sometimes takes on different meanings. But the idea of a navigation center, the type that I'm talking about, has beds number one.
Yeah.
So it is a shelter, but it also has the services to help individuals with their housing needs. And, getting a person permanent housing is quite an endeavor, particularly someone who's chronically homeless, particularly, like I said, someone who's working through mental health and substance issues. And each of these individuals, there's no conveyor belt here. There's no assembly line here. Each individual has to be treated as an individual. They have individual problems. I mean, it could be as simple as something as smoking in your room or a dog that bites. There are many, many complications. But when you add in serious mental health issues, things get really complicated in a hurry. So a navigation center is designed to identify and address the individual needs of people coming into the system and getting them the either, whether it's transitional housing, which is like bridge housing, shelter for the night, or ultimately, the big goal, permanent housing. It helps them navigate the system. And, it's another component of that is getting them what we call document ready, because obviously we want them to get the services and the benefits that are available to them. But that's paperwork, and so it's another piece of the puzzle that we have to get ready. So Navigation Center is really a place, at least what I envision is a shelter with a team. Behavioral wellness is involved. I think what they call a multidisciplinary team with social services, public defender. Everybody's pulling on an oar, and the shelters are there as well as housing authority, and you're really bringing together this collaboration where everybody's trying to figure out, okay, how can we get Joe's situation figured out, or Sarah's, or Billy's. Every one of them is a new problem on the chalkboard. So that's the concept that I envision.
Are there other communities that have been successful at reducing or eliminating homelessness in their community? I know that there's that organization that you had mentioned, Built for Zero. Are there solutions out there? Are there models that Santa Barbara County can look to and say, let's do that?
And that's just, that's the $1 million question right there. I think, there have been so many efforts in the last decade to heal the problem of homelessness. As you probably know, we had a 10-year plan to end homelessness that started back in 2006. And I've read that plan, and it's a good plan in my mind. I thought it was well written, and I liked the approach. I don't know if the resources were sufficient, but I do know I did some research on this recently, and back in the early 2000s, it was George W. Bush who came up with the notion of housing first, and 230 cities and counties signed a 10-year plan to end homelessness using the housing first model. And since then, we've doubled our capacity, but unfortunately, none of those communities was successful in truly ending chronic homelessness. Mm-hmm. Not to say that they weren't great efforts and they weren't important efforts, and they made a difference. I'm not criticizing that they were not good things. They were, absolutely. But the thing you just asked me is really exciting to me, because this organization, Community Solutions, has a plan called Built for Zero. I encourage your watchers and listeners to check it out. They have achieved something that is, to me, just mind-blowing, because they're just in the last, I believe, 4 years, they have 11 communities where they have ended veteran homelessness. They have 5 communities where they have ended chronic homelessness. And when I say communities, I'm talking about big communities like Rockford, Illinois. There's 600,000 people in that county. Bakersfield, California was one of them, one of our neighbors. And I've been talking to them about, how the heck did you guys do that? I mean, that's just like, it just seems so amazing. Yeah. Bergen County, New Jersey, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Abilene, Texas, all ended chronic homelessness. And then there's 3 that ended both. Rockford, Bergen County, and Abilene ended both veteran homelessness and chronic homelessness. So, that seems to, they seem to be onto something, and they have a few little secrets to their method. Yeah. But I am 100% interested in, figuring out how we can incorporate those successes in Santa Barbara County and our cities.
Yeah. One of the, I covered a meeting, it was a few years ago, it was at the Louise Lowry Davis Center. And it was one of the most, for me as a reporter, disappointing moments that I've experienced in terms of what Santa Barbara is. But, this was this proposal for some tiny homes at the Carrillo and Castillo commuter lot. Uh-huh. And there was some funding, or there was an application for a grant that the county was going to do from the state, and there was this belief they were going to get a certain amount of money to try to build some tiny homes there for the chronically homeless. And a bunch of people came out and they spoke against it. Neighbors, people who live on Castillo Street, and obviously, this is your home, and this is where you live, and this is where you're raising your family, and it's totally makes sense that people would have these kind of defensive responses to putting homeless and tiny homes up near them. It feels like that would be a natural reaction for a lot of people because they don't really know what that looks like yet. But it was speaker after speaker saying, we love this idea, just not here.
Yeah.
And I felt as though it was a little bit disappointing because, it's progressive, woke Santa Barbara saying not in my backyard. And many of the people who were speaking were the kind of people who would be advocating for homeless services, but not there, And so I don't know if you saw that meeting or read any of the coverage, but can you talk a little bit about when we're talking about shelter and housing and looking at sites to sort of deal with the chronically homeless, how do you ever get around this concept of putting it somewhere where people don't want it? I mean, I don't know anyone who's going to say, yeah, put it right next to where I live.
Yeah, well, again, a great question. And quite often the devil is in the details. And I go back to, who are you talking about? In Santa Barbara County, we have an astonishing housing authority. In the city of Santa Barbara, we have a world-class, nationally, maybe internationally recognized housing authority. So one of the things our housing authority in Santa Barbara does is they build incredibly quality projects that not only fit into a neighborhood, but actually enhance them. If you go out and look at their projects, they're gorgeous. Yeah. And so, there is that sensitivity. Now, with respect to the tiny homes issue that you're talking about, there are different levels of entry into these shelters. And when I say that, I don't know, but I think the tiny homes on Carrillo were going to be very low barrier facilities. And what low barrier means is that, these are people who are not getting treatment, who are not necessarily taking their mental health medication, who are not being asked to stop using methamphetamine or alcohol. And so, there's, I think there's legitimate reasons why people would be concerned about individuals who are struggling with behavior and being next door. I think this is anecdotal. I don't even know if it's, I just heard this, but that at the Carrillo housing project across the street that housed homeless people, they didn't want it there either. So, I mean, the thing you're talking about, everybody, I get it. And I don't think we should, we should be critical because people want their neighborhood safe and peaceful. So location is important. I mean, location is important, especially for low barrier housing. A couple of things that are going on is, have you heard of the notion of scattered site housing?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so scattered site housing is something that I'm learning about, and that's where we pair up an individual with a particular apartment. Okay. So there's not a group moving into a neighborhood. It's somebody who there's a landlord involved. The landlord's willing to take this on. There's going to be supportive services that are going to be coming out and making sure that the individual is following the rules and taking care of themselves. And it's much lower. I mean, it seems to me to be much lower impact. But getting back to your question about low barrier housing, it's if we're going to put together a project of low barrier housing, I think location is just critical, and it limits our options, but I don't think it makes them impossible.
When you were talking about the funding coming from the state of California and the federal government, is the funding for construction? Is it for actual building? Is it for people, staff, salaries? It's obviously expensive to build things.
Yeah.
And then, what kind of things do you build? Is it temporary housing? Is it things that last for a certain amount of years? What's the funding sort of connection between actual structures or portable homes?
Well, so not my area of expertise, but the way I understand it, there are different pots of money for different problems. There's some money that's designed more for people who are struggling with economic displacement. In other words, they're not chronically homeless. They're looking at losing their apartment because the breadwinner lost his job or her job. So there are things like rapid rehousing to keep people who lose their place, get them immediately back into housing so they don't develop into a chronically homeless or extended homeless. There's diversion programs. There are prevention programs. So there is money that moves towards at the other end of the continuum for individuals who are not normally homeless and have the ability to be employed and make money. And they just we need to help them, give them a helping hand to get out of their economic problem. But then there's money on the other end of it, and when we talk about something like a navigation center or a center for lower barrier or bridge housing or what have you, that money typically quite often has a component of wraparound services that's essential. So and in my experience, the services can cost as much as the housing.
Yeah. I
mean, they're expensive. The services are very expensive. I think last year, Santa Barbara had $40 million that came in. It's countywide. We got $40 million assigned to our homeless problem, but only half of it went to housing. So, it's expensive, and it is important to get those services as well, because without them, housing retention, and we don't get that kind of impact that we're looking for. We're really helping those individuals.
Let me put you on the spot here a little bit. Where's a good spot? Where would be a good place in Santa Barbara County? Santa Barbara County is it's so big, it's so long. It's like we talked some people some years about splitting the county, right? North County, South County, two different counties. If we had a navigation center, if we had a place, a piece of land where you could have this kind of housing and you could tie it to services, and it's a place where neighborhoods aren't going to get upset because it's too close to where they're trying to raise their families. um, you know Perfect world. Where is that piece of land? Where does that exist? You and I were talking the other day about Isla Vista and sort of the encampments that popped up there. So it's like something like that, in Isla Vista is causing problems. So like, what is where could you put something like this?
Well, you have to be an optimist if you're going to engage in fighting for the homeless. But I do think there's a path forward. And as my goal is, we need to have our parks protected. We need to have our downtown corridors where people feel safe and where there's not public health and concerns about, being approached. And, we need to have our beaches and, our highways and train right of ways, safe where people are not going to get hurt. So we need that, and we need to protect and help the homeless and be compassionate and provide shelter for them. So in working with both of those things, I do think there's a path forward. And my approach right now, the one you saw me talking about at the leadership forum, was a collaboration. We do have a very very wealthy, a very generous population. They'd love to see, they'd love to help the homeless problem, and they'd also like to see their business corridors cleaned up. They'd like to see tourism not to be impacted, and all the people, the 12,000 people who work in the hospitality industry, they'd like, so they want to see that win-win. And that's where I'm focusing right now. I'm talking to the business leaders and our real estate moguls, for lack of a better word, landlords, people who have real estate, and trying to get them thinking about, what do you want? What would you like to see? And how can you contribute? And, in terms of location, as we talked, it's funny, I was out I was out looking at a piece of property today that would probably be perfect. And I'm not going to tell you where it was because it's way too early, but I did talk to a good chum of mine who's in real estate, and he knows the owners very well, and he thinks that there might be a possibility for a win-win there, where this is a property owner who wants to develop their property. They're struggling with approvals. They need a little more water. These are all things that, if there's the political will and courage to say, well, okay, and will you give us 6 acres or 2 acres or 3 acres, or will you, work with us in creating a campus where we have a navigation center and tiny homes and housing and what have you. So, those are the collaborations I'm looking at right now, is trying to get our public and private sectors aligned in a way where everybody gets a piece of cheese, so to speak.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit, Gordon. Can we talk a little bit about you? You obviously have had a very distinguished career in Santa Barbara County. And then you started your Solutions Court, and that's been very successful. Talk to me a little bit about like where you get sort of this heart for wanting to make a difference and help the community. A lot of people in their retirement, you could be doing a million other things other than spending your days talking with real estate people or developers or property owners about a good spot for a navigation center. Just take me back in time. Where does this come from? Why do you have these interests? And just talk to me a little bit about where that comes from.
Well, I felt so blessed to be hired by the district attorney's office and to spend my career working in public safety and going into court and representing the people of the state of California. To me, that was like such a privilege, and it was so gratifying to me. You see all these cop shows and movies about bad cops and prosecutors, and that just wasn't my experience. They're always going to be good people and people who are struggling more than others. But my career was so satisfying to me to be able to get paid to go and make a difference every day. And I just felt like, what a gift that was to me. And so, I loved making a difference. And when I got out of the office, Joyce knew that I was very passionate about homelessness, because I tried to start Solutions Track, which is my North County court homeless program.
Sure.
And I said, Joyce, if there's a chance for me to come back, I'll work for free. This is something I believe in. I love my community. I get both sides of it. We need to be compassionate and take care of these people, and we need to do the same for our community and respect our open spaces and public spaces. Mm-hmm. And it just was a good fit for me. I mean, it doesn't feel like work, and I love the people. I love talking to the people that are working on it. They're really good-hearted people. So it's it's just a great part of my retirement. I wouldn't I can't think of anything I'd rather work on.
That's really interesting. Take me back in time, like when you were growing up, right? Mm-hmm. Did you have any nexus or interface with homeless populations or homeless communities? Talk to me a little bit about sort of your upbringing, and did you have a pretty good upbringing? Was it difficult, adversity, or you somebody who you always saw the homeless people and you're like, I wish I could help with them? Or maybe talk a little bit about that.
Well, I had in many ways I was blessed in my upbringing, and in many ways I had a lot of struggles. I was a child of the 60s. My mother and stepfather were both serious alcoholics. So I grew up in that environment. So I saw firsthand the trouble of substance abuse and how it impacts lives. My brother died last year from alcoholism. So it's, when I was growing up, I was definitely what you might call a poacher turned game warden. I mean, I was a young kid in the 60s that, but for the grace of God, I could have gotten in a lot more trouble than I ever did. So, I definitely recognize that, there is a lot more we can be doing for our community. And I have to say my biggest passion, you wouldn't know it from this, but my biggest passion is working with at-risk kids, and very engaged with the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse and their teen court program. Been doing that for 20 years. The Daniel Bryant Center, I don't know if you know about that, but it's such a gift to our community. The mentor program that CADA has, it's all about helping kids stay on track. And that's that's really, I mean, that's the other end of the pipeline. If we just could do a little better job helping kids who are struggling, we have we have a lot less crime to deal with. And
Right.
so, that connection was always very, very evident to me. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably it in a nutshell. I see both ends of it. The people who have made a complete mess of their lives, and the kids who we really have an opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I grew up in, I like to say Goleta, but really all over Goleta, Santa Barbara. My parents were renters, so we moved often. And for a period of time before my father met my mother, he was sort of in and out of homelessness, and always hardworking, but lose a job. And so what he would do once he got his life together, and once he had me and everything, he still had all these homeless friends, like at Alameda Park, Pershing Park, and he would take me to the park, and I would interact, like on weekends with these homeless individuals, and these are exactly like, these are the chronically homeless people. These are the people who are pretty much under the influence of some kind of substance all day. But it's funny because I do have sort of fond memories of this, because we would play cards, they would talk to me about their life stories, and how they got into this situation, and they would always say, don't ever start using drugs, don't ever start drinking, you're going to be a good one, and and so they were always trying to pass on these lessons. But it's interesting because I remember those days, and you're just kind of hanging out and sort of interacting with them in a way that's not like, oh, I'm scared, but you're just kind of a person, but sadly you live on the streets, and so, and if you go to Alameda Park today, you still, you see the same thing. There's a lot of homeless people there, and of course Pershing Park. So I think that these things that we're dealing with, we've dealt with them for a long time, or we've sort of just figured out a way to coexist and make it all work. And the encampments issue has been such a big deal because it's so visual, and it's, for me, it's very sad. You just see these individuals and all their stuff, and they're like, holy cow, I get upset if I come home and I don't remember where my toothbrush is, or something. Like, that's such a very low level kind of inconvenience. And then you have these other people who just their homes are constantly changing. And I guess, I wanted to sort of ask you about, there's some really harsh opinions about homelessness in the community. There are people who just they're fed up, they have zero tolerance. The Santa Barbara recently said, hey, we want to expand our sit-lie ordinance to parts of Milpa Street. And even though the Boise decision said it's pretty much not enforceable because you don't have any other place for them to go, there are people who say, well, why don't we just do this throughout the whole city? Just get them out of Santa Barbara, And so can you talk a little bit about the importance of approaching this situation in a non-emotional way? I mean, these aren't people who they're mentally ill. These aren't bad people who want to be living in this environment. You do hear that, oh, they just want to be homeless, they don't want to work. They make a lot of money panhandling, and I guess there's probably some of those individuals. But can you talk about the importance of seeing this problem as this is all of us? We need to come to a solution. It's not about, let's get that person or that guy out of town. How important is attitude in approaching this situation and working together and taking sort of the emotion out of how to reach a solution with it?
Well, I have to say I fall somewhere in the middle of that. For instance, with encampments, they're so dangerous that I don't think we're going to be in a good position to engage in the 19 to 20 contacts that normally occur before, of street work, before you get someone moved. It's there definitely needs to be outreach.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, if we dismantle a dangerous encampment, I mean, job one, outreach. Get in there, start talking to them. They probably know them anyway, most of our outreach workers, but get in there and you know, start explaining to them, here's what's happening. It's too dangerous. It's too, you know, it's unhealthy for you to be in here. And we're going to, you know, we're going to have to clean up the encampment, and then give them notice, plenty of notice. I mean, more the better, but you know, it could be 72 hours, it could be a week, it could be two, whatever, but give them notice and say, here's the date. Then reach out to them, the shelter, and say, and we want to provide you with shelter. I mean, another thing I'd like to do, and I'm not sure how much traction this is going to get, but I'd like to see us have safe camping, where we not only offer shelter, but if you want to sleep in your tent, you can sleep in your tent, and we're going to have it in a place where you're not going to be defecating on the ground outside your tent. There's going to be sanitation there. We're going to have people there to help you and give you services and you know, showers, if even, you know. So, you know, I do think it's going to be one of these things where there will be what they call, you know, code enforcement to remove people who are trespassing in dangerous areas that are fire hazards, and you know, you could get killed by a train or a semi. So you know, I think there is going to be kind of a middle ground there, but absolutely, we absolutely need to approach it with compassion, and we have to approach it with alternatives and choices and dignity. When I say dignity, I mean not just put people in a big tent with a bunch of beds.
Yeah.
You know, they need a place to store their stuff. You know, if they have a dog that has to be taken care of, we need to be mindful of you know, maybe their partner or what have you, especially mindful of their health needs. So yeah, approach it from a pure compassion point of view. And I do think the you know, society and our communities should be directing our homeless to safe shelter. And I think that's where there's a responsibility on both sides. You know, there is responsibility for the homeless to you know, take advantage when they can of the safe shelter. And there are exceptions that, you know, they're struggling so much with mental health issues that they're freaked out by that.
Yeah.
So there's no perfect outcome for everybody, but I do think for the majority, we can navigate them into shelters, and it's our job to do that, and not just say leave people sleeping wherever they want to sleep. That's not good for the community. It's not good for the homeless. So.
Yeah, and you talk to the downtown business owners, of course, you know, and that's their big issue is we can have our private security remove them from our property, but then if they're out on State Street on the public property, well, what good is that then if they're blocking an entrance? I want to ask you one more thing before we wrap up. I touched on it earlier, but Isla Vista, you know, we've had those encampments pop up in Isla Vista during the pandemic. What do you think of that situation? And is there an out to that other than, you know, just going in there and removing them?
Well, you know, it's complicated. I was actually out there today when I was doing my rounds looking at some real estate, and you know, I was just checking up on it and seeing it because I hadn't been there in a few weeks. But you know, Isla Vista's been a great opportunity for me to have an upfront view of what happens when you have low barrier housing in the middle of a community that just takes over the park. That encampment is particularly troublesome. The fentanyl use out there and methamphetamine use is it's off the charts. I mean, it's, you know, I've seen buckets of syringes that they've collected when they do a cleanup. And when you have drug problems and homeless individuals, you're going to have theft problems. And so, bicycle theft out there has just been rampant, as well as all other types of theft. So, and then, some crazy behavior that many of the students have seen that nobody should have to see. So it's been an interesting experiment because we did put tiny homes out there, as you know. We put pallet shelters, 20 pallet shelters out there. And unfortunately, in my experience, even though that helped, it really hasn't changed the dynamic out there. It's still, in my opinion, a high risk encampment, even though I think they've mitigated the fire issues. So what happens? That's a good question, because the Isla Vista Parks and Rec District, I mean, they're an amazing group. I've worked with them. They absolutely have gone above and beyond the call of duty, because they're not in the homeless business, but they've been managing this thing through COVID. But there is a date in June, supposedly, when that's going to be closed. Now, I don't know where we're going to get the housing vouchers or the housing, the shelter that we really need to do to comply with Boise. I also, the pallet shelters are going to be moved to Lompoc. So those people are going to be displaced as well. Yeah. So I chatted up my friends out there today, and they're all scratching their heads still. They don't know what's going to happen in June. Yeah. But I'm sure there's a plan that I don't know about. But it's been an interesting eyeful.
Well, Gordon, I really appreciate you taking time to talk about all the good work that you're involved with and all the organizations you're working with and everything you're doing to help sort of be part of the solution to this challenge that we're facing with homelessness in the community. Because, there's a lot of people who are doing stuff, and it looks like you're really trying to help people come together and pull together and sort of be working on a solution that maybe we'll see some progress. And so, kudos to you for just tremendous amount of volunteer work you're doing on this issue. It's not easy. It's not glorious at all, but you care a lot. And I think, we owe it to you to, appreciate everything that you're doing. So good luck going forward.
Really appreciate that, Josh. And you, I think, a good place to end is what you just said. If we pull together, I mean, there are a lot of resources in this county, and we're still struggling to de-silo those resources. And if we pull together and really organize, and, I think there needs to be some alignment, of reality and some alignment of resources. Like I said, I'm an optimist. I really think we can make a significant difference in the quality of life for our community and for the homeless. I mean, I truly believe that, and I think we can do it in short order. Given the great resources we have to move quickly with money and some of these great housing opportunities that can go up quickly.
Yeah, it's, I guess. We got to be optimistic, right? Eventually, we'll figure it out. And these other communities, the functional zero is really something to look at as well. So thanks a lot, Gordon Auchincloss, for your time. Appreciate it. And good luck to you.
Thank you, Josh, for inviting me. It was great to chat with you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
See ya.